Hello. I feel like I need to lead with the song. Let's talk about sex, baby. What's
I
that song?
know.
Okay, so we're going to talk about sex today. Why are we talking about sex? Well, why not? Isn't that what we women talk about? So,
Seriously.
like to sort of demystify sexuality. It feels like we need, or I need to kind of talk about how I grew up and then how Claire grew up. But Claire and I, as women, I'm a single woman. She's in a relationship. We talk about sex, and so we thought, well, this seems like timely and pertinent. Let's talk about sex. So here we go. Here we go.
And just kind of looking around also, you don't have to look far to see some very distorted views of sexuality, using. So we believe that sex is deeply powerful on an energetic level, on a physical level, on a connection level. So to see it used in distorted ways, because it is so powerful, it's either drawing us closer to unity with ourself, with other, with divine, with source, or it's pushing us away, creating that dissonance.
Well, break down or break through, right? So we can use our sexual energy as a conduit for these energetic and bodily breakthroughs in terms of healing and enlightenment, or we can use our sexual energy to degrade our system. um, so all right, well, I'll go first.
Yeah, so we were thinking that we just kind of share some of our personal stories, nothing too in detail, but juicy enough. Because also, I think a big piece of harnessing our sexual power for light and for highest expression is first understanding where we've come from, what was modeled for us, what we experienced in our very influential years about sex, because we continue to carry that. So nothing can change unless we kind of go back a little bit. So, Julie, what you
Awareness.
thought about sex? What were you shown? What were you told?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and God, you would think that was like free love and all that. No, not in my home.
Not in Catholic St. Louis.
No, not in my home. So just we were not allowed to have Barbies because Barbie had boobs, and that Barbie could be naked. You could take all her clothes off, and all of a sudden there was a naked Barbie, and it's like, oh my God, no, not you can't have that in our house. And as a young girl, I was like, what do you mean I can't have a Barbie? Like what? So I would sneak over to my neighbors to like play with her Barbies. We were not allowed to watch a lot of television shows that had women who might have been, perceived as sexual beings. The Love Boat was the den of iniquity where people went to have sex because clearly there was sex going on that boat. And then we weren't allowed to watch Gilligan's Island because Ginger was she was a whore.
It was a hoe.
Because she was hot and she was single. So clearly she was like a threat to all the couples on the island. I don't know.
She's so
So the idea that like boobs were a bad thing, I was like, well, like this is going to be a problem because I'm pretty sure I got those. Okay, if a woman was pregnant or like a cute little puppy was walking down the street, we'd ask the question, oh, what sex is it about the animal? Or if the mom was pregnant, oh, do you know what sex? And my mom said, no, you don't ask that. You say gender. You don't say sex. And so I grew up with a whole lot of like, shame and repression, and it's a bad thing. My mom also told me once that men can't control themselves. And so it's up to me to keep all of that on lockdown, keep all that on lockdown because the men are just going to, lose their shit. Trying to think like so many things about sex. I had zero sex education. In my generation, like the big sex talk at school was in 7th grade. And I remember like going with my mom. It was the moms and the daughters in the gymnasium. And they showed this film, like literally, it was just like a little egg swimming with sperm. I mean, it's nothing like what's out there today, I'm sure. And they gave a little booklet that the moms were supposed to go over with the daughter at home. Never saw the booklet, never heard a freaking thing about any of it. So I was kind of left to my own devices. There was no internet. So like, how are you going to figure this out? My older sister was very repressed in that we weren't going to be have conversations. And then I had 2 older brothers. So, and we were all being raised in the same environment. So I had even my period, like when I got my period before my older sister. My mom told me nothing. My dad gave me a box of pads that were wrapped in a brown paper bag. Okay, so they used to wrap it at the store so you didn't feel ashamed. Shame that I am bleeding. And I remember I was a competitive diver. And so it came summertime and I was like, I have diving meets. Like, I'm going to have to do something. I need a tampon, and I knew that from some people at school. And I said something to my mom and she's like, well, I don't know how to do that. I can't teach you that. My mom never used a tampon. Okay, never used a tampon. So I'm in the bathroom fiddling around for hours, trying to figure this shit out. So I knew nothing about condoms. I knew nothing about birth control. I mean, I knew nothing. And I related like sex now to desire and like suppressing my desire because I couldn't be like those crazy boys who were out of control. I think all of this kind of led into my eating disorder, like shutting my system down, like probably shutting down development unconsciously, right? Like so that I wasn't going to become, a fully embodied woman because what was my mom going to do? And then my anorexia, I was told I could never have kids. And it's funny. I mean, I think I had my period really not much because I think once I got my period, I got into my eating disorder and shut all that down. And so the doctors were like, you're never going to be able to have kids. Cause by that point I lost like 60 pounds and whatever. And, somewhere before the eating disorder got really out of control and I lost weight, I was pretty violently raped and, whatever, found naked in a 7-Eleven. It was horrific. So that kind of locked in that, oh my God, this is what happens. Because I remember thinking this man, he was like 18 or something, probably a little older actually. But I remember thinking he was hot and I wanted him. Like I wanted this man. And then things went really sideways. And so then that locked in even further, like desire, sexuality, you're going to get hurt. It's bad. It's dangerous. Then when I fell in love, as all young girls do, and thought this was the one at 19, a year after I'm raped, so I'm pretty sure I'm ready for love. I told this man who became the father of my children that I couldn't have, children and, we didn't need to worry about it. He had suggested a condom and I didn't even know what a condom was. I literally thought it was made, in my brain, it was made of like the same material as like a hot water bottle. And I thought it was like this little like cap that you put on and you reused it. Like a guy just like kept it in his back pocket and then he just like pop it on his penis. So I remember thinking, no way, I can't. And this was before AIDS and all that shit. And I was like, no, I got condom. Ugh, because I thought this was this reusable thing. And so I said I can't get pregnant anyway. And then I got pregnant the first time I had willing sex, and I had a son who has autism at 20. So that was super cool. So that further locked in this idea that like sex is dangerous. I mean, this shit is dangerous. You don't mess around with this. And so then my sex life with my husband was perfunctory. You had to do it sometimes. So I did. I did not enjoy it. As I started healing from my trauma and my eating disorder and all that, and my relationship with food and my body started changing, I remember like, come on, God, I hear people talking about sex. Like, I hear people really like this thing. Why don't I like this thing? This isn't really fair. I don't want this life where I don't even like food and I don't like sex. That doesn't seem right. I gotta give me one, you know? And that kind of wrangling in my brain went on for a while. And then blah, blah, blah. Ended up getting divorced. And, you know, at that time started dating because what the fuck else was I gonna do? I mean, I got a date. I mean, otherwise, the whole world will think I'm undesirable and nobody wanted me and I'm the loser who, you know, got divorced. So I had all these thoughts about that. So I'm like, entered the dating pool. And so besides the rape and my first husband, no other partners. My second partner was my second husband. So getting lots of experience in. And wow, apparently my body does do special things. If that marriage was only about reclaiming this powerful, pleasurable, energetic geyser, thank you. That was well worth it. So now that I'm divorced again, that is something that's been really, I miss that. I do not loosey goosey go into, now I understand it as an energetic exchange. And that when I take on the semen, you know, it contains energetic information of another human being. I'm really careful about who I'm going to, let's just say, cross pollinate with. And so that's been a whole thing of like, wow, I want that sex. I mean, oh my God. I mean, I'm longing for connection and heartfelt, you know, relationship, intimacy. But to be honest, on a very primal level, mama would like a little sex. So that's where we are. That's where I am. It's my sex story. And Claire had a different experience than I did. So I'm ready to hear it, Claire. Share.
First of all, just in all of your vulnerability about, you know, sexual violence that was done against you. And for anyone listening who has had a similar experience, our hearts go out to you. And I have not personally experienced that, but many, many people in my life have. So even more reason to talk about it. And thank you for so just bravely sharing about it. I know that's not necessarily easy.
Oh, you're so sweet, Claire. Thanks. I mean, you always have a nice way of, let's go, let's move and shake. But it does bear mentioning for those people who have been hurt, because our sexuality used against us is a travesty of our, you know, divine female essence and energy. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so we had pretty different stories, which is funny when we talk about the difference in our eating disorders, which is how we originally met. Julie and I began our friendship at a treatment facility for our eating disorders back in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Is that all?
Yeah, 2007.
Oh my God. That was my last hurrah. And then I got better.
Well, it was nice to meet you on the tail end of your healing journey. So thanks for that.
I know, right?
Thanks.
That was probably like my 8th treatment center. And I finally said, I'm spiritually starving. That's the problem. I got to leave here and find my connection to spirit. And that's when everything changed. So sorry, sidebar.
And you did. Look at you now. So, you know, I think it is important to look at what we were told. And I was told some similar things, Julie, but, you know, coming from this evangelical Southern Baptist background, it wasn't necessarily that we don't talk about it. The biggest issues, the glaring problems were the things that we did talk about. So in youth group, I remember distinctly in middle school, we would go to these like, you know, revival camps or summer camps and all that. And you'd sing praise worship songs and talk about Jesus, read your Bible. But really we went because we wanted to meet cute boys. Let's be real. So I remember this one particular camp where they would split the guys and girls up and have the sex talk, which it wasn't about the biology of it. It was about the spiritual ramifications. So I am grateful that from an early age, I was taught that sex is more than just something physical. It's more than just what we do to make babies. Like we were taught that sex was this like deeply connecting, almost like a contract between two people. And that, you know, marriage, of course, is only for a married man and a woman. And that if you have sex with other people before you get married, here's your heart. This was literally like an object lesson that I remember. It was burned into our brains. Here's your heart. You are giving pieces of yourself away that then your future husband will never get to have. So it was like this fear of, don't you dare touch another person. Repress your sexuality until you get married. And then once you get married, you're supposed to let the cat out of the bag and suddenly have this great sex life. And it's like, wait, what? So
did you have a promise ring or something?
Oh yes.
Dad, okay, I remember this.
I'm guessing my father probably is not watching this episode based on whatever. But yes, I had a golden promise ring, and that was this super creepy like ritual with the dads would give their daughters these rings, and it was like, we are your fathers holding on to your purity and your chastity for you. This is this commitment that when we give you away to your husband, you know, then he gets to take the promise ring off your finger and put on your engagement. So I literally in college, I had taken my rings off so that I could like more thoroughly vomit in a toilet after a night of partying and drinking. And the ring fell off in the toilet, and I was like, fuck it. And I flushed that shit.
I didn't know that's what that was. Oh my God.
So wore it all through college until that time. Anyway, so yes, it was very much about protecting female sexuality, because at any time it could be snatched away from you, right? And I don't know what the boys were told. I'm sure it was something along the lines of like, your sexuality is a sin, your sexuality is dangerous, you must repress. The women, the girls, were taught that, similar to what you said, men have different sexual energy than women, that they can't control, that they're like, I remember we were told that they're like an engine, like a train. And once that engine gets going, there's no stopping it. So it was our responsibility to, like you said, keep this shit locked down. And it was phrased as like, don't tempt your brother in Christ, right?
Oh.
Because we're all here to support each other's relationship with God. So it was the girl's job somehow to not cause their brother in Christ to stumble and fall.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So that meant don't dress like a hoe, don't act like a hoe, don't talk like a hoe, blah, 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 blah. So, and I do remember my mom specifically one time telling me, I think she had just come off some women's retreat, you know, and she was like, it's actually a sin to withhold sex from your husband because they need it more than we do. And I was an adolescent. I think I was middle school or maybe early high school, and I was just like, Jesus, that sucks. Like, oh, so now I'm being told I have to have sex if I don't want to? Get the fuck out of here. But I think a lot of women were told that.
I think so too. I remember someone I knew, and her mom told her that if you don't have sex with your husband when he wants, he'll get it somewhere else and
Exactly.
you'll lose him.
Yep. Yep. And like blue balls, like to get a guy all revved up and then say no was like actually physically unhealthy for him. I mean, the shit that we were told is ridiculous. And then it's no wonder that we go into our own sex lives like, whatever. So,
Well, and it's funny because I think you were leading with our eating disorder stuff. Yours was just kind of like whatever, and mine was like, I'm not going to do any of that.
yeah, the fear and the shame express themselves very differently in our lives. And so it's interesting when you were talking, I was like, huh, that's the same that was for me. It was when I kind of hit puberty, when my eating disorder started picking up. That's also when my sexuality started to express itself. And I hit a point where I was like, all this repressive bullshit, hell no, that's not for me. So similar to my eating disorder, once I jumped in, I dove straight in. And so I was also influenced by books I was reading. I was really into this like kink erotica. And I remember my mom, she must have like flipped through the book or something, but she was like, this stuff's nasty. And I'd be like, yeah, it's fucking hot, you know? And the music, I was really into Lil' Kim and Trina and Eve and Missy. I loved the female rappers who were like kind of taking on this male dominated rap industry. And so a lot of their lyrics were very detrimental towards men and using sex as power over men. So that really appealed to me. Let me back up 1 second here because I think this is important. In high school, I was deeply in love with my best friend who was dating and obsessed with our other best friend. So we were like this weird throuple. I was always the friend to him. He never saw me as anything romantic. And so, of course, I'm not blaming anyone in this situation. I bring this up because I created stories out of that experience about myself that then played out in my sexuality. So I told myself I was always going to be the friend, or which then turned into like fuck buddy or piece on the side or mistress. I was never going to be good enough to be the main event for someone. So I took that, and then my first boyfriend, who I lost my virginity to in high school, ended up being just a trash human being who I continued to hook up with until like into my 20s. And he played a lot of mind games with me, a lot of manipulation, and I was just deeply hurt. And so in my teenage angst, I decided it was like me versus men. And that was the music I was listening to, that was the stuff I was reading, that it was like female empowerment means dominating men sexually, treating the game the way men do. And so that meant multiple partners, no emotional attachment. So I really fell down that rabbit hole, and I told myself it was about female empowerment. And I would just keep my regulars so that I could call someone anytime I wanted. Okay. And get that connection fix. The irony of all of that is that it was kind of this energy of like revenge fucking, you know? But the irony, and now that I know this, and I had an awareness of this, but I wouldn't have phrased it this way. But of course, whatever we do to the other, we do to ourselves. And so it took me years. It took me like well into my 20s to be like, this actually isn't badass. This is just hurting me.
Yeah.
And I faked my orgasm until I met my husband.
Really?
Yes. So my pleasure, no weight in my sexual encounters.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting, because you saying this reminds me when I was 17, I discovered my parts down there,
Uh-huh.
and I brought myself to orgasm when I was 17. It was just so natural. And I was like, this is great. This feels amazing. Does everybody know about this? How come nobody's talking about this?
Discovered something new.
That's what I thought. And it's just really interesting that our body, like, even in spite of the environment, our body wants to express itself in that way. So when you said that, I'm actually surprised by that. You never told me that. So I'm like, wow, okay. All right.
Yeah, because for me, and it brings the question, can love and power coexist in a relationship or in intimacy? And that's something I've kind of been sitting with. For me, it was all about power. And so my heart was completely shut off. And it was all about becoming this man's, like, and women, some greatest fantasy. So if I can play, it was all about role playing for me. It was a performance. And it became a very deeply ingrained part of my identity. It's so fun. So Sex in the City keeps coming up, which we talked about on a previous episode recently. But like, I was Samantha, the super sexually expressive one. All my friends knew that about me. I ended up writing my own erotica, which was like very low vibe. And, I was just kind of repeating the stuff that I'd been reading. But we would have nights in our freshman dorm. They'd be like, read us some of your stories. And like, people would gather in our dorm room and I would read my personal erotica from my exploits.
Wow.
So, fun note. Well, I'll come back to that.
Okay, hold on one second. You asked a question about love and power. Can love and power?
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
The guides dropped in. Love is the ultimate power.
Ooh, so for me, it's a distortion of what power means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so I did have a few relationships. None of them obviously worked out well. I hurt a lot of people on my own self-destructive path. And that's been a big part of my sexual healing. I think we've mentioned in other episodes, there are some rituals and beautiful ceremonies like a womb clearing where you can energetically kind of sweep out and clear. You were talking about kind of taking in your partner's energy, taking in residual stuff that's not yours. So as part of my own womb clearing, it's been a lot of self-forgiveness for using people, for intentionally hurting relationships. So that's been a big release for me. But interestingly, what's made all the difference is my own self-touch. And sometimes that can mean, I don't like to use the word masturbation because it just feels yucky in my mouth. Like, that's a very low vibrational word for something that's so powerful and beautiful. So I say self-touch sessions or self-love sessions that have opened my mind and opened my heart to this concept of really what sex is, and sex magic being this connection with the divine and with another person. But for a solo session, it's just you, and that's weird. At first I was like, oh, so what is this, like I'm having sexy time with God, like what is happening here? But I invited in divine spirit. That's the only way I know how to say it. Yeah.
So right now what's coming in is harnessing creative life force energy for your own highest healing and integration. So they're showing that the energy of the orgasm um, is so dynamically healing. And it is a force, life force creation flows from the orgasm. And so the idea that that is just used to make babies, when it can renew they're showing me the child in you, it can bring you back to that original blueprint of a child with that energy.
That's beautiful. The
Yeah.
original blueprint. Yeah. So you can imagine getting married, like bringing all of this experience. And damn it, if the pastor wasn't right, I had given myself away to all these different people. So with my marriage, I wanted it to be different. And so, in a hilarious twist of events,
I remember you telling me this. I was like,
that was everyone's response. So I meet my husband. He's a wonderful Christian man. And it was at a point in my life where I was trying really hard to be a wonderful Christian woman. And so we decided not to have sex before we got married. And my friends were like, what?
I remember you telling me that we were at Bricktops or Brio, and you told me that, and I was like, it seems like an odd time for for this pivot. Oh my God.
Yes. It was an interesting decision. One, because of what I just mentioned, like I was really trying to like make Christianity work in my life. And it was still the guilt and the shame that I was carrying around. And so I didn't want to bring that energy into something that I knew was so different and so special and so unique. And he was like, no sex. I was like, yeah.
Your idea. Somehow I thought it must have been Luke's idea. I didn't even know it was your idea.
No, it was my idea. I was like, I want this to be a fresh start. So we successfully waited until our wedding night, which is hysterical. I know, so funny, which, that's the beauty of sexual intimacy, is that each partner's is going to look different. I don't know that I would recommend for everyone to not try out the sexual chemistry with the person you're choosing to spend the rest of your life with, but it was what we decided to do, and it was fine. It was beautiful, but I thought that was going to fix a lot of things. And of course, I still brought all the energy. I still brought all the hangover from it. And it was actually not until my husband that I had sober sex. And I remember thinking it was so weird. I was like, oh, like I'm not drunk. I'm not high. I'm not blah, 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 blah. And it's scary. It's actually kind of scary. If you have never fully allowed yourself to be seen. And I remember being upset at how uncomfortable it made me to have sober sex.
Well, like, that intimacy with, when people are having sex, when they're using substances, of course there's no intimate connection happening. There's no engagement of your soul. I mean, you're altered.
Well, that was the point. That I think that's what I was doing, so that I didn't feel any kind of heart connection. And there were some partners that I was like, oh, I could maybe see, but for the most part, it was like, thanks, bye, see ya, next time I need you. And that's where a lot of the guilt comes in, is because there were some truly like genuine people that I was just like, who do you think you are? You're not going to get a relationship with me, like very on that power trip. And so then trying to switch that off and be like loving and a supportive wife and totally engaged in our sex life. Like there was a lot I was working through. And then my husband coming out of the Christian tradition as well, like being told his whole life that his sexuality is dangerous. Now he's having to restructure all of the, so it was a interesting challenge in the beginning of our marriage on that. And then, yeah, just kind of moving into my expansive solo practice that has changed my life. I think, so I will just say, I think as a person, I'm a deeply sensual person. I live through all of my senses. I love physical sensation, not even just pleasure. So, for me, sex, and when I discovered tantric teachings, Tantra is a way of life. Tantra is fully experiencing in our human bodies life as ceremony, essentially. The ecstasy, the wonder of just what it means to be here on this planet. And then to add our understanding of sex into that, it's the ecstasy of everyday things. And when I discovered Tantra, it clicked. I was like, I am an embodiment of Tantra. So to kind of wrap up my story, obviously it's not over. I'm still very much like learning new things and figuring out ways to deepen intimacy and all of that. But it took an entire shift in my mindset of how I think about sex. And once I was able to shift that and set some things free, now sex means something so much more powerful to me than anything anyone ever tried to tell me about it, or that I've seen in the media or in books. Like, everything that we're presented about sex can't even touch the actual power that lies there in our sex magic. So, should we talk about sex magic?
Sex magic. I'm like, hold on, Claire. You've skipped ahead for a lot of people. First of all, you said Tantra. So I'm sure a lot of people have, this could be the first time they're hearing that. Additionally, sex magic, that's new. And then I want to interject, as you deepened your intimacy with yourself, you've been able to access more of this energy for yourself, for yourself, by yourself, through yourself. But that's because you've been working towards, identifying and becoming aware of how you use sex to devolve or degrade your connection to yourself. So this is, I guess, as for anyone who's listening, it's a process getting to the place where you're able to access this potent portal of, this portal. Because if people skip ahead and just go get Osho's book and start reading up on, okay, this is what they're talking about. I'm gonna do sex magic, and it's like, okay, you didn't get here overnight. So I guess I just want people to bring awareness, open heart, open mind, curiosity. But if people feel like they need help healing from some of these things, I would encourage kind of starting there. What is my sex story? What is my sex story? Do you know your sex story? If someone asked you your sex story, like Claire and I just gave our sex story, could you give your sex story to someone? And if you're like, oh my God, no, I could never. First of all, I couldn't identify my sex story, couldn't express my sex story. You're probably not yet ready for sex magic. And there's no hierarchy. It doesn't mean, oh, you're behind. It's just, this is, a practice of healing and feeling the fullness of the bodily expression of who you are, and warts and all, injuries and all. So before we just dive into sex magic, I felt like I wanted to say that to people, because sex magic isn't so magic if you're carrying around a lot of wounds.
Yeah. And so to close this episode, touch yourself lovingly the way you wish someone else would touch you. That's where it starts, in my opinion. How can you possibly tell a partner how to touch you in the best way if you don't know how yourself? So, straight from us, go touch yourself.
And as someone who had a different, maybe touch yourself. If you have to start just stroking your own tongue, because guess what, Claire? If I was listening to you 20 years ago and you would have said, so just start with touching yourself, I'd be like, eh. I couldn't hear that. I couldn't hear that then because I was so repressed around. So start with how do you meet your body every day? And if you feel uncomfortable going down there right now, start somewhere else. Start developing a loving relationship with your physical body in a sensual, in a sensual way. Because if people are carrying around a lot of sexual wounds, that might be like they just can't do it.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I remember when I just literally started very lightly touching my own arms when I felt like I needed some soothing. And, finding places on my body that felt good to just start there if you have to. So I'm just putting it out there for all the people who really might still have a hard time with that, meeting themselves in that loving and tender way.
And that is what I meant. I mean, it doesn't have to be quote unquote sexual, although I think everything is sexual. But I like to give myself a hug and then just lay my cheek here. When I say that, I mean, how do you want someone who loves you to touch you, period? And let that person be you. And even, if you're as you're touching yourself, trying to find those little spaces that you're like, oh, this is maybe like a little more sensitive than over here. Right? Like just finding your spots. And it can be fun to do with a partner too, with no intention leading to sex, just the light touch. Like, where are your spots?
Okay, so Claire, I wanna reflect back to you. Thank you too for telling it like it is and being honest and vulnerable. And hopefully, anyone who's listening, hopefully you have someone in your life that you can share your story with and express yourself in that way, because that's, I feel like, a really large part of reclaiming and embodying our sexuality for ourselves.
Yes, beautiful. And if you would like to share your sex story with us, we would love to hear it. So
We're here for it. All right. All right. Great seeing you as always.
thank you, friends.
Bye.